$285 billion. I want you to visualize that number, 285 billion. That is the market value of the corporate giant that just looked the state of New York in the eye and said, "We are done." Philip Morris International, a titan of the consumer goods industry, analyzed New York's suffocating tax rates, navigated its regulatory maze, felt the political hostility, and made a decision that should have sent shockwaves through Albany. They packed up their headquarters and moved to Connecticut. Think about that for a second. Not Texas, not Florida, not Tennessee, Connecticut, a state that isn't exactly known for being a tax haven. But the situation in New York has become so toxic, so economically irrational, that even moving to Connecticut felt like an escape to freedom compared to staying in the disaster zone created by New York's leadership. This wasn't a mom-and-pop shop closing down. This wasn't a struggling startup running out of cash. This was a Fortune 500 powerhouse with operations in 180 countries. They had called 120 Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan home for decades, and they left. And what was New York's response? Was there panic? Was there a press conference announcing immediate reforms to keep businesses? No. There was silence, absolute silence. Not even an acknowledgement that they had just lost one of the most significant corporate taxpayers in the United States. That silence tells you everything you need to know about the state of New York under its current leadership. They have lost so many businesses, they have hemorrhaged so much wealth, and they have driven out so many productive taxpayers that a Fortune 500 headquarters leaving town is just another Tuesday. It doesn't even make the front page anymore. It is just accepted as the new normal in an economic wasteland created by progressive policies. Welcome to Tax Hack Pro. In this video, I am going to show you exactly why Philip Morris fled. I am going to break down the math on how much money New York is losing every single day. And I am going to explain why this specific departure represents the death spiral of what used to be the economic capital of the world. But before we dive into the collapse of the Empire State, I need you to do something important. Hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button, because we are about to expose the economic reality that the mainstream financial media refuses to cover honestly. CNN won't tell you the truth about the business exodus. MSNBC will ignore the crushing tax rates. They are too busy protecting their political narratives. Here at Tax Hack Pro, we bring you the raw economic truth. But the algorithm suppresses this kind of analysis every single day. Your subscription is how we fight back. Your like is how we get this information to millions of Americans who need to understand what is happening to their economy. So please take a second, subscribe, let's expose the truth. Part 1, the tax nightmare that drove them out. Let's start with the numbers, because businesses don't make decisions based on feelings, they make them based on spreadsheets. And the spreadsheets in New York are a horror show. In 2021, New York raised its corporate tax rate from 6.5% to 7.25%. In a vacuum, maybe that sounds manageable. But nothing happens in a vacuum. New York also reinstated the capital base tax. They jacked up the top personal income tax rate to 10.9% for high earners. Then, if you are in the city, you have to add New York City's own corporate franchise tax of 8.85%. Then you add the Metropolitan Transportation Authority surcharge of another 2.175%. Do the math with me, add it all up. That is a combined corporate tax rate of 18.275% for businesses operating in Manhattan. That is the highest in the entire country, not just high, the highest. It is a punitive tax on existence. Now look at the individuals, the executives, the managers, the employees who actually make the company run. The combined state and local tax rate for them hits nearly 15%. Think about that. If you are a high earner in New York City, you are handing over 15 cents of every dollar you earn to the state and local government before you even pay a dime to the IRS. These weren't one-time increases during a crisis. In March 2021, the state budget included $4.3 billion in new taxes, the largest hike in decades. The message from Albany to the business community was crystal clear. You exist solely to fund our spending addiction. Philip Morris looked at the math. They could stay in Manhattan and pay an 18% corporate tax plus a 15% personal income tax for their employees. Or they could move just 33 miles away to Stamford, Connecticut. In Stamford, the corporate tax drops to 7.5%. The top personal income tax drops to 6.99%. This isn't a marginal difference. We aren't talking about saving a few bucks on office supplies. For a company generating billions in revenue, this is tens of millions of dollars in annual savings. For executives earning competitive salaries, this is hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional take-home pay every single year. This wasn't a difficult decision. This was basic arithmetic. It is the kind of math that anyone running a business understands instantly, but the politicians in New York don't seem to care because it isn't their money they are wasting. Part 2. The exodus nobody talks about Philip Morris wasn't an isolated incident. They were just one prominent name in a catastrophic wave of businesses fleeing New York's economic environment. Between July 2021 and July 2022, New York lost 300,000 more people than it gained. I want you to read that again. 300,000 net population loss. That is the size of a major city vanishing in 12 months. It was the largest population loss, in both percentage and absolute terms, of any state in America. The Empire State lost so many residents that it literally cost them a seat in Congress after the 2020 census. That isn't just a statistic. That is a loss of political power. That is a fundamental repudiation of the state's governance. And where people go, businesses follow. In 2021, New York lost 487 more single-location businesses to other states than it gained. That was the worst business loss of any state in at least 3 decades. During the pandemic alone, Manhattan lost over 5,000 businesses. Let me give you some names so you understand the scale of this disaster. Elliott Management, one of the world's largest and most influential hedge funds. They moved their headquarters from Midtown Manhattan to Florida. Alliance Bernstein, a massive asset management firm. They relocated to Nashville, Tennessee. Charles Schwab. They left for Texas. According to Bloomberg, New York and California each lost nearly $1 trillion in managed assets as financial firms fled south. $1 trillion. That is the actual wealth that was driven out of these states by punishing tax policies. The financial industry is New York's golden goose. They are the biggest taxpayers and the major employers. And that industry is shrinking in New York while exploding in Miami and Dallas. Catherine Wilda from the Partnership for New York City sounded the alarm. She warned that financial professionals were going from giving 55% of their earnings to the government in New York City to giving only 38% in Texas or Florida. That is a 17 percentage point difference. For someone earning $1 million annually, that is $170,000 more in their pocket every year just for changing their zip code. Why would anyone stay? Part 3, the Connecticut strategy now. Here is where this story gets really interesting. Connecticut isn't exactly known as a low-tax paradise. They have had their own struggles with fiscal mismanagement and businesses leaving. But Governor Ned Lamont understood something that New York's leadership couldn't grasp. You have to be competitive. Lamont recognized that Connecticut's location created an opportunity. Companies wanted access to the Northeast Corridor. They wanted access to the talent pool in the tri-state area. They wanted to be close to the capital markets, but they didn't want to pay New York's insane tax rates. Stamford became the target. The city offered a 45-minute train ride to Manhattan. You could maintain your New York relationships, attend meetings in the city, and access New York resources, all without paying New York taxes. When Philip Morris started looking for alternatives, Connecticut didn't even have to offer massive special incentives. They didn't have to pay the company to relocate. They didn't need to bribe them with subsidies. The existing tax structure was already so much better than New York's that the decision made itself. Philip Morris signed a 12-year lease for over 71,000 square feet in Stamford. No taxpayer money was used to lure them. It was just a corporation making a rational economic decision, and Connecticut celebrated it. Governor Lamont stood with the CEO at the announcement and said, "They looked all over the world. They looked all over the country. And they decided they wanted to be in Connecticut." The unspoken part of that sentence is the most damning part. They looked at New York too. They were already there. And they decided it was worth the disruption, the moving costs, and the headache just to get out. That is the ultimate indictment. A company with decades of history, infrastructure, and institutional knowledge in New York decided to leave. Part 4. Innovation leaving New York. Philip Morris International isn't just a cigarette company anymore. They are in the middle of a massive transformation that makes New York's loss even more significant. Since 2008, PMI has invested over $14 billion developing smoke-free products. By 2024, these new products accounted for 40% of their net revenues. Their heated tobacco product, IQOS, has actually surpassed Marlboro in net revenue. Think about that. In less than 10 years, their innovation product became more valuable than the most famous brand in the history of tobacco. This is a company reinventing itself. They are investing billions in R&D. They are hiring scientists, engineers, and tech experts. They are building the future of their industry, and they are executing that vision from Stamford, Connecticut, not New York. Why does this matter? Because innovative, transforming companies are exactly what New York should want. These are high-value jobs. These are well-paid employees. These are companies generating massive tax revenues while pushing technological boundaries. But New York's political environment is so hostile, so punitive, and so ideologically rigid that even a company actively working to phase out cigarettes decided they would rather be somewhere else. Part 5. The deafening silence here is what makes this story truly pathetic. New York's complete non-response. There was no press conference from the governor trying to explain what happened. There was no statement from the mayor. There was no recognition whatsoever that a Fortune 500 headquarters with a $285 billion market value had just abandoned the state. The silence was deafening, and it was revealing. New York has grown so accustomed to losing businesses that a major corporate departure doesn't even register as news anymore. Think about how catastrophically things must have deteriorated for that to be true. Imagine if Texas lost a Fortune 500 headquarters. It would be headlines for weeks. There would be investigations. Leadership would be held accountable. In New York, nothing. Because it happens so often now that it is just background noise. This is what happens when one party controls a state for so long that they stop caring about consequences. The politicians in Albany and City Hall don't face real competition. They don't fear electoral punishment. They can raise taxes, drive out businesses, and destroy the economy, and they keep getting reelected. The people who remain are either wealthy enough that taxes don't matter to them, or they are dependent on government programs funded by the taxes. The productive middle class, the business owners, the entrepreneurs, they are gone. Part 6, the death spiral. Philip Morris leaving is just one data point in a larger pattern of decline. From 2020 to 2024, firms that relocated to Texas brought more than 1,200 investment professionals with them. Tennessee added more than 1,000. Florida added hundreds. These aren't entry-level positions. These are traders, portfolio managers, and decision-makers earning 7 or 8 figures. These are the whales of the tax base. The kind of taxpayers New York absolutely cannot afford to lose, and they are losing them anyway. John Cummings moved to Dallas in January 2022 after 30 years in Manhattan finance. His assessment: the Texas business environment is really optimistic. It's a really diverse economy now. That is the shift that terrifies New York leadership, or at least it should. Texas isn't just competing on taxes anymore. They have built diverse, sophisticated economies with high quality of life. New York still leads in total assets under management, but all the growth is happening elsewhere. The future is being built in states that don't punish success. The Heritage Foundation documented exactly what is happening. High levels of taxing and spending are causing the Empire State to hemorrhage not just people, but businesses too. This isn't complicated. It is a death spiral. High taxes drive out productive people and businesses. A lost tax base means less revenue. Less revenue means the politicians either have to cut services or raise taxes further. They always choose to raise taxes. Raising taxes drives out more people and businesses, and the cycle repeats until the system collapses. Part 7. The new reality here is what the politicians in New York, California, and Illinois refuse to acknowledge. Companies and people have choices. They are not trapped. They are not hostages. For decades, New York got away with high taxes because it offered something unique. If you wanted to work in finance, you had to be in New York. If you wanted access to capital markets, you needed a Manhattan address. That is not true anymore. Technology eliminated geographic necessity. You can trade from anywhere. You can raise capital remotely. You can signal corporate prestige from Austin or Nashville or Miami just as effectively as from Manhattan. Once the geographic monopoly disappeared, only one question mattered: what is the cost-benefit analysis? And for more and more companies, New York's costs far exceed its benefits. The politicians still think they have leverage. They still think companies need them. They are wrong, and every departure proves it. Connecticut understood this. Even with their own tax problems, they recognized they needed to be competitive. They couldn't match Texas or Florida, but they could beat New York, and that was enough to win Philip Morris. The Philip Morris departure is a microcosm of what is happening across America. Blue states with high taxes, heavy regulation, and hostile business environments are losing to states with lower taxes and pro-growth policies. This isn't just about corporate profits. This is about where the American economy grows, where jobs are created, where opportunity exists, where young people build careers and families. For decades, the answer was New York. Now the answer is Texas, Florida, Tennessee, and other states that understand basic economics. The implications are profound. As productive people leave blue states, those states become more dependent on federal bailouts and high taxes on the few who remain. Meanwhile, red states are attracting the most productive, highest earning, most innovative people. Their tax bases grow, their economies expand. They can invest in infrastructure and services while maintaining lower tax rates. It creates a self-reinforcing cycle. Success breeds success. Failure breeds failure. Conclusion: Philip Morris International, $285 billion market value, Fortune 500 company, global presence. They chose to leave New York after decades because staying had become economically irrational. They moved 33 miles to Connecticut, saved millions in corporate taxes, saved executives hundreds of thousands in personal taxes, maintained access to New York markets without paying New York prices, and New York's response: silence. This is the blueprint of failure. Tax businesses until they leave, tax individuals until they flee, lose population, lose congressional seats, lose economic dynamism, and blame everyone except the policies that caused the disaster. Meanwhile, other states are thriving, growing populations, growing businesses, growing opportunity. Proving that low taxes and pro-growth policies work, the choice couldn't be clearer. You can have the New York approach: high taxes, business hostility, economic decline. Or you can have the competitive approach: business-friendly environments and economic growth. Companies are making that choice every day. Philip Morris made it. Elliott Management made it. Thousands of others have made it, and thousands more will follow. The question is, when will voters in these states demand leadership that understands basic economics? When will they stop electing politicians who drive prosperity away? Here is what you need to do. Share this video. Every American needs to understand what is happening to our economy. Subscribe to Tax Hack Pro. Hit that notification bell. We are covering the economic stories the mainstream media ignores. If you are in a state watching your economy collapse, pay attention to the policies causing it. Demand better. Fight for economic policies that actually work. Thanks for watching Tax Hack Pro. Subscribe now, share everywhere. And remember, the numbers tell the story. Philip Morris looked at New York and said, "No thanks." That should terrify every politician in Albany. Instead, they don't even notice. That is how you know the collapse is complete.